Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Absolute Superman issue 22, written by Jason Aaron, with art and colors by Juan Ferreira and letters by Becca Carey. Superman battles an old foe as the Man of Steel, aided by Jimmy Olsen and the Omega Men, track down a lead on Lazarus Corp and Brainiac, leading them to Argentina, where they find a series of Lazarus Corp labs. Superman knows that he was going to find Brainiac there, but what he found instead was something else. Clark is tossed out of the lab and down into the street, where he tells the surrounding people to run as Metallo confronts him, intent on killing the hero for his master Brainiac. The new Metallo design is fantastic. I like that it's not just a cyborg dude anymore, and if anything, it's got a little bit of alien design going on, with the giant robot legs sprouting out of its back, and it just feels very much like something akin to what Brainiac has become with he's got like the robot legs and everything. You can tell it's from the same design philosophy behind Brainiac because Brainiac did create Metallo. Metallo uses the kryptonite-powered arms to hit Superman, fracturing his cheekbone. The Argentinian people try and help Superman by grabbing Metallo's legs. The villain tries to kill them. Superman hits the armored being, splintering his knuckles in the process as he decides to get the villain away from all of these people. Grabbing Metallo, Superman tries to fly high into the sky, but he finds Metallo is too heavy for him in his weakened state. Metallo is ready though, slamming Clark hard into the ground where he tries to rip his arms off. Clark tries to understand why he's so weak, and he can feel the blood literally boiling in his veins, blasting Metallo with a flurry of heat vision. He soon remembers having felt this before, back when he fought Christopher Smith, the Peacemaker. Superman realizes this armored being is Smith, and thanks to the heat vision blast, most of Metallo's armor melts off, revealing it is indeed Christopher Smith. So this is kind of like an obvious twist. I think people weren't really expecting this to be some sort of twist, like who is Metallo? Especially because Chris was basically Metallo in his last appearance in everything but name. He had the kryptonite weapons, he was like half a cyborg, powered by a kryptonite, he was Metallo for a while now. He's just been given the name now. I'm quite excited for him to actually now show up as Metallo, since he and Superman have an established relationship already, but what I'm most looking forward to is how Superman is going to deal with him, since the time he fought him before, Superman was still very angry and still unsure of like how to do everything, and that's why he took Chris Smith down as hard as he did. And since then he's fought Ra's al Ghul, King Shazam, a bunch of other little villains, so he has worked things out and worked out how he wants to be a better hero, or at least have a better idea of what type of hero he wants to be. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how he's going to deal with someone he actually already knows and tried to save before. Metallo briefly remembers the name Chris Smith before memories of Brainiac's torture flood his brain, reminding him that he is Metallo and Metallo only, as he punches Superman hard. Sometime in the past, a young Christopher Smith begins his first mission as a Peacemaker, telling his fellow Peacemaker that this is his first time ever out in the field. The older Peacemaker wants to know what they are fighting for, and Chris thinks that it's interests of the Lazarus Corp, but the man knows that they're actually fighting for each other, wanting Chris to just follow his lead, since amongst the chaos of the crowd shouting insults at them once they get down on the ground, he might start to find it hard to tell which ones are the bad guys and which ones are the good guys. Chris asks which ones are which, but the man only answers with a chuckle, welcoming him to the Peacemakers as they enter Metropolis airspace. I'm glad we are getting little bits of backstory for Chris, getting to see how the Peacemakers really brainwashed him into being that good little soldier we were introduced to back in issue 1 of the series. These Absolute books do a really good job of exploring how these bad guys end up as bad guys, and how the hatred and chaos in this world just grinds people down so that they almost have no other choice but to do this. And I think that's where we're headed with Chris here, where he was kind of put into a situation where he just was forced into this, but then he also started believing in the Kool-Aid he was drinking, and it made him such a mess of a man when we met him at the start of this series. Back in the present, Superman tries to think of a way to get the battle outside of the city, but Metallo is on him so quickly he doesn't even have time to react. As he battles the villain, he tries to figure out where the kryptonite is, since this time it's not in any bullets or ammunition that is being fired at him like it was during the siege of Smallville. It feels like it's everywhere. The sun soon comes out from behind a cloud, if but for a moment, and it helps recharge Superman and heal him immediately. Realizing he's only got a second of this sunlight, Superman charges up his fists and hits Metallo hundreds and thousands of times in a matter of seconds, something he actually did to Chris back in Smallville when he took him down the first time. This time, however, however, instead of defeating the man like it did in Smallville, it barely breaks his skin. A small trickle of green blood seeps from Metallo's mouth and he spits it at Superman, kryptonite inside of it burning Clark's face like acid. Clark soon realizes because of that, it's not the armor that's actually giving Metallo the edge with the kryptonite. The radioactive mineral is inside Chris. I think combining Metallo and the Kryptonite Man into one being is a smart choice. Well, while I like both of those villains separately, they do kind of sort of fill the same role. Kryptonite Man is a little bit more of like a metahuman with the kryptonite powers, but they're essentially filling that same role as someone who has kryptonite that can hurt Superman. Giving Metallo that much needed upgrade so he's not just got, the kryptonite heart or the kryptonite, arc reactor or whatever you want to call it in his chest. It's actually him himself, is actually his entire body, is a great evolution of that idea and something that I'm surprised we haven't really seen a lot of earlier. I do like also that it's really from the bullet that Ra's al Ghul shot him with that all of this is coming from. So he's got, when we see his face for the first time, he's got this big bullet hole in his forehead where all the green kryptonite is kind of like oozing out of. It's a great look for him. On top of that, Juan Ferreira is back on the art, and it's just the perfect type of artist for this action-packed story. I've loved his previous work in literally everything he has ever done, back from when I first saw his work in Gotham by Midnight and now this stuff. And I think his paneling rivals the stuff that Hayden Sherman is doing over in the Absolute Wonder Woman book. It's always fun, it's dynamic. I love the cross sections he does of like people going through buildings, or in this case, later on into a sewer grate down below the ground. It's just really fantastic stuff that never really get to see in traditional Superman. It keeps you engaged the whole way through. Back in the past, Chris undergoes his post-mission therapy session with the Brainiac AI, asking him, well, what's the problem? Chris explains that when he looks into a crowd, he sees his father's face and all he wants to do is put a gun to his face and kill him. The AI believes he's experiencing some vision problems, figuring it's defective headgear, so he is issued a new helmet and told to go on his way. Chris, however, wants to make it listen, not wanting to go back out in the field again and wanting to just talk to an actual person, much like how Lois wanted to back when she was working with Lazarus, but the AI shuts him down, thanking him for his service. And not long after that, Ra's shoots him in the head and supposedly kills Chris. In the present, Brainiac, who was indeed in the lab that Superman investigated, congratulates Chris on being given another chance, hoping that he is going to take advantage of it and make someone proud. Superman, meanwhile, keeps on fighting Metallo, despite the man's kryptonite blood literally melting his bones whenever he punches him. He keeps telling the villain that his name is Christopher Smith, not Metallo, finding calling him that has more effect than his punches. Superman bashes Chris through a building, telling him who he is, where he is from, and how when he was 8, his father shot up a synagogue, leaving young Chris sitting alone in the car, and it was that night that Chris decided to become a peacemaker and try and make the world a better, safer place. Okay, so most of Chris's backstory, at least when it comes to a shitty, racist father, seems to be intact, and it's honestly really sad that Chris wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to make sure something that, like what his dad did, never happened to anyone else, and he thought the Peacemakers might be able to provide that for him, and they took him, brainwashed him, turned him into a tool for a corpo that just didn't care for him and just used him up and spat him out and just didn't want anything to do with him after he died, quote unquote. It's really sad to see something like that, and it makes me wonder, like, oh, what would have Chris been had he actually had that, Superman role model in his life earlier on? Like, would he have actually become a hero? Superman keeps calling him Chris, and it causes Metallo pain as his mind begins remembering what Brainiac did to him. Soon his systems begin shutting down and he goes into cardiac arrest. As he seizes on the ground, Chris remembers what Brainiac did to him, bringing him back from the death after Ra's al Ghul shot him in the head. Brainiac has decided to give Chris another chance to prove he's not useless, replacing most of his body with robot parts, as he reveals the kryptonite bullet that he was shot with entered his bloodstream and is having a spectacular effect on him, something Brainiac wants to keep testing out. Chris asks who he is, and Brainiac reveals that when he was a boy, he owned a rotting head as a pet, which he called Metallo, and that is now Chris's name, ordering him to go by that name from now on. I really dig the mad scientist Brainiac making a comeback, since modern Brainiac always feels, unmoored on like what he exactly is. Like he's the conqueror of worlds, the collector of worlds, or, just a thorn in Superman's side on some books where he's just fighting Superman, and then the next time he's trying to take over universes, and it always feels like there can never really nail down exactly what they want to do with him. So bringing back the whole mad scientist vibe from Brainiac of like the 70s and early 80s is great. I love that idea, and I like that Jason is kind of cranking that up where he's like, yeah, he's a mad scientist and he's also into like body horror and just testing out things on himself and making himself into like a gross Cenobite monster face being. It's great. It's a fantastic take on Brainiac, I think. Back in the present, Superman gives Chris CPR, trying to make sure he doesn't obliterate the villain's ribcage and lungs with his breaths. Eventually, it works and Chris comes back to life, immediately attacking Superman as he shouts that his name is Metallo. Metallo punches Superman down into the sewers beneath the city, getting him away from the sunlight. Superman keeps up his verbal assault alongside his physical assaults, telling Chris who he is and how his mother is named Mary, and he was a peacemaker until they killed him. Clark reveals that he went to Chris's funeral and no one from Lazarus came, and he had to carry Chris's coffin to his grave and told his mother that he died a hero. So this is some stuff I kind of wish we got to see, since it's some real Superman stuff right there. Even when Chris was gone, Superman was there trying to help him and the people that Chris loved in some ways. He was trying to still figure that out and trying to still figure out how to help people, but he was still trying. And I find that very endearing. It's a very Superman trait, and I love that Superman is doing stuff like that. We've seen stuff in the last issue where he gave Lois a list of things he does, like gives medicine to some sick people in Botswana and, you know, feeds the neighborhood dogs in Brazil and all that sort of stuff. So I want to see like an issue kind of exploring that, kind of like a day in the life of Superman and all the stuff he does for the world that people don't even realize. Clark tells the villain that his name is Christopher Smith and it's on his gravestone, and 3 weeks ago his mother died and he was there to comfort her. However, she thought that Superman was Chris, telling him how much he was loved and how proud she is of him. Metallo begins choking Superman, trying to shut him up, but Clark tells Metallo that he told Mary that her son loves her. Hearing this makes Chris stop, snapping out of his brainwashing and finally telling Superman that his name is Christopher Smith. Now this is the good stuff. Superman winning a battle with his words, building on his previous fights and how he learned, especially from the Raish fight where he learned that killing and violence isn't always an option and there are other ways, you just have to have patience. I'm really liking how Aaron has been building on every previous arc, having Clark learn something, then take that on, and then use that to evolve the way he is Superman. Brainiac appears, wondering if Chris is crying again, finding the men of today are such a disappointment. Brainiac makes his escape, telling Superman that there's billions out there on Earth that he can go and play with now. Clark thinks about going after Brainiac even in his weakened form, knowing that that man has caused him so much misery, but he doesn't. Instead, he helps Chris up, telling him that he's not alone as he hugs him, knowing no matter what, he's going to find Brainiac as no one outruns the arms of Superman. Absolute Superman issue 22 was a fantastic opening to a new story arc, bringing back an old enemy, evolving them, and giving Superman a chance to deploy some of the things he has learned over the last few arcs and the last couple of villains he's defeated, not just to defeat an enemy this time, but also help them regain their humanity and maybe even become a new ally. I loved this new take on Metallo. I feel like it was the obvious evolution for not just Christopher Smith's character, but also Metallo in general. I like that we're getting a little bit of backstory on Chris Smith as well and exploring what made him become a Peacemaker in the first place. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jason Aaron is going to do with him in the coming issues, and as I said before, I think Superman may have found a new friend in that of Metallo, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they do with him. I'm going to give this issue a 10 out of 10.